Chapter 2 Charlene Beckwith. Although elements of cooperative-type systems had periodically surfaced and been considered by various individuals and writers, it was never given any serious attention by humanity as a whole. Non-money-based societies have existed since the first primitive groupings of human beings on Earth, far before the dawning of organized civilizations. But this later cooperativism was different in that it was a way for a modern industrial society to reap the benefits of that type of system. When the formal idea was first proposed, it was so foreign to the thinking of the time that the concept was not taken seriously. It became a popular topic of conversation and debate for a brief period, and then was brushed aside in favor of the next latest criticism, cure, or platform for the evolution of 21st century man. Like other fads, it retained some zealot supporters that began various grassroots movements, but their numbers remained comparatively few and transient. There had been attempts by more radical offshoots of these groups to break away from society and start small communes that lived under a quasi-cooperative system, small, contrived communities attempting to isolate themselves from the world at large. These were composed mostly of determined idealists who saw modern society as a hotbed for greed, corruption, crime, oppression, and vice. Many of these idealists were as impractical as they were courageous. Their communities generally began with a strong, united zeal, but over time deteriorated into frustration and disillusionment due to poor planning, bad management, and lack of technical skills for these ventures to succeed. Ultimately, they disappointingly dispersed back into mainstream society. It was difficult to be completely self-sustaining and independent when surrounded by the economic systems of bordering communities and nations. Their experiments were harshly criticized and ridiculed by outsiders, who saw these pioneers as radicals attempting to undermine a national way of life. Most attempts failed quite early on. We now turn to an essay written by Charles Morgan entitled The Beckwith Principles. Mr. Morgan's essay is an account of the circumstances that led Charlene Beckwith to write her famous treatise Cooperatism, introducing the world to the principles that eventually became the system we know by the same name. It is assumed that Mr. Morgan's account is for the most part accurate, although he never had a chance to consult with Charlene herself, since she had long since passed away before he began his undertaking. He was able to draw extensively from the many other pieces already written about her. This account stands because it was the most widely read and accepted at the time. To give some perspective to Charlene's economic standing in the world at that time, her standard of living relative to the world population was far above the norm for a great deal of humanity, and far below that of the upper and upper middle classes of the more prosperous nations at the time. This was an era when humanity was still divided into separate geographically designated states. One must keep in mind the social and economic stratifications of the population during this time were vast and varied. The Beckwith Principles by Charles Morgan. The cooperative system was first introduced by a woman named Charlene Beckwith in the first half of the 21st century. From what we know, she was an average housewife with 2 children living in the United States, which was one of the larger and more affluent countries during that period. Her husband worked for a local manufacturing firm, and Charlene had a job with a national retail department store, which were large organizations that sold a great variety of household products to the general public. They had 2 children. During those times, it was often necessary for both parents to work to pay the bills, which were fees for certain needed services. and occasionally be able to afford a few niceties in life. They lived in a quaint suburban setting, had a house with a mortgage, which was debt from its purchase, and two modestly priced car payments, regular monthly payments on a loan for purchasing a vehicle. Money was always a concern, and they had to scrimp and save in hopes that maybe they could afford a vacation once a year. Although there were good times, she and her husband had to work hard and sometimes long hours. However, their life would not have been considered underprivileged in any way. They were able to keep pace with the lower rungs of a standard middle class American, which was an adjective referring to a country known as the United States, lifestyle, but it took a great deal of effort. Charlene often felt that she and her husband spent much of their lives doing jobs that held very little personal satisfaction for them in order to maintain a reasonable standard of living for themselves and their children. She resented having to send her children to daycare, which were places you could, for a fee, take your preschool children so they would be under adult supervision while you went to your job, because she wanted to be at home for them and with them, especially when they were young. And daycare was costly, cutting into the extra money they made. She was envious of those whose husbands made large enough incomes that allowed their wives to remain home with their children. She was frustrated at having to sacrifice so much of her life working. The Beckwiths had no particular desire for extravagant living. They were content just being able to afford the common commodities. They enjoyed time with their friends and family and did their best to support the school activities their children were involved in. But they found, even apart from working 40 or more hours a week, that a great deal of their daily lives were spent dealing with money concerns. It seemed there was always something that required money: church tithings, helping the veterans, buying Girl Scout cookies, fundraiser for this and that, birthday gifts, graduation gifts, wedding gifts, trying to save enough for Christmas gifts each year. This was on top of the normal but financially draining necessities throughout the year, like daycare, doctor visits, dental checkups, oil changes, vehicle registration, insurance payments, lawn fertilizers, utility payments. Then came all of the unexpected expenses that would pop up: car repair costs, parking tickets, unexpected doctor or dental visits, prescriptions, pest control problems, plumbing, electrical, roofing, or housing maintenance problems, TV repair, a computer problem. They were constantly dealing with financial headaches in their working and personal lives, and constantly under pressure to wisely manage the money they had. Charlene began to notice how most of an individual's life was obsessed with and controlled by money in one way or another. She would occasionally discuss this with her husband, who sympathized with her frustrations and felt the same way. However, he would respond, "This is just life. This is how it works. What choice is there? We just have to do the best with what we have, taking the good with the bad. Sure, I wish things were different too, but they're not." Then he suggested maybe she should go back to school and start a new career, hoping the idea of some sort of change would pull her out of her doldrums. Momentarily, this piqued her interest, but she knew they could not afford to send her back to school at that time, and that money was not the only roadblock. Time was an even larger factor. It took all of their free time now just to keep up with the needs of their children. They could not afford the decrease in income if she quit her job, or even if she only worked part-time, which was working under the normal 40 hours per week. The time with her children would still be limited because of her studies and classes. A great deal of the burden would shift to her husband. And was this fair? And did she even want this? Clearly, the answer was no. The problem was not simply solved by bouncing to a new job or struggling to start a new career. It went deeper. It had to do with the entire system, being locked into an endless pursuit of money just to live, robbing everyone of precious time to enjoy the things that really mattered. After every 8-hour day, 40-hour week at the same job, making her mortgage payment, car payment, etc., she wondered, was this all there was to life? Was this the only way? Shouldn't there be another way? She was frustrated, and she found that others were frustrated as well. They were frustrated with rising gasoline prices, costs of living, impersonal corporate conglomerates, unaffordable insurance, mega profits at the expense of the middle class, skyrocketing college costs, inflation, the national debt, and taxes, just to name a few. For many, much of life consisted of disappointment with one's financial situation, which seemed to create barriers between them and their freedom, causing them to resent the necessity of having to make money not just to be able to afford life's extra pleasures, but simply to live. It seemed that every day was another day of scrambling for money. She began to ponder easier, more humane, less stressed ways for people to coexist and maintain an acceptable standard of living for everyone, without all of the bills and debt, and without working their lives away in meaningless jobs. Even in retirement, she saw most people weren't all that free. She observed that they continued to have money concerns and problems, many times seeing all of their savings being swept away by inflation, healthcare costs, assisted living costs, medications, and the countless never-ending financial scams aimed at the retired and the elderly. She conjectured, if a majority of people agreed to end the rat race, to stop this endless quest for money, if everyone could agree to cooperate in some organized fashion, couldn't humanity give birth to a new system for a modern society? Couldn't a system be forged where citizens could all agree to give a fair share of their time to handling all the necessities, all the products and services needed to support a modern lifestyle, so that people could be free and all share equally in the benefits of that system, eliminating the ceaseless stress over financial concerns as well as this inherent dog-eat-dog mentality? She admitted that she constantly doubted herself, wondering if she was over-exaggerating, turning molehills into mountains. It seemed like the money system and all of its ramifications and consequences was a fact that simply must be accepted. This was clearly the view of the world. How else could modern life be lived and structured? How else could people access commodities and services? She started writing about her frustrations and imagining the possibility of a new system, one that would work in the best interest of everyone. She writes, "The average person does not have a huge desire to spend his or her time analyzing and cultivating their personal financial situation. They spend whatever time is needed, but would rather be doing something else with their time. For most people, money is not a passion. And even those who scrutinize every penny, investing well and staying on top of their financial prospects, if you ask them why they are doing this, most would tell you, so I can retire as well off and as early as possible. So their goal is not the money, it's what the money can get them, namely freedom. The money gives them the freedom to not have to do the money thing anymore. The goal is living the lifestyle they want without worrying about the money. It's a means to an end rather than the end in itself." However, there are people out there for whom playing the money game and winning is an end in itself. Yet, even the people in this category are looking, I believe, for something beyond the money. They do it for the clout, the prestige, the status that comes with financial success. They are looking for the respect and power that being a winner in this game buys them. None of us would have any use for the money system if our desires and needs were met by some other means. Money would become superfluous. People have endlessly debated the proper use of money, she asserts, but never seem to entertain the idea of discarding it in favor of something more productive, more efficient, more humane. If everyone was willing to devote some of their time to maintaining the goods and services we all need to live normal, happy lives, then the amount of work any individual would have to put in over a lifetime would be minimal. Everyone would reap the benefits. Some may use certain goods or services more than others, but everyone would have access to more than what they need. This standard of living would be available to everyone at all times at no monetary cost, eliminating the monetary system. She began to formulate how this might be done. She continued, "In earlier times, people banded together in tribes and survived by a mutual cooperative effort, where each member of society performed functions that helped the society as a whole. These primitive societies flourished in a cooperative manner. The American Indian and Eskimo tribes in North America and many African tribes, as well as the Australian Aborigines, give us plenty of examples of non-monetary systems. In fact, all early societies at one time or another began and survived in this way until the money system was introduced either by force or as a more efficient means of trade. There are still examples of small groups, such as in Africa and South America and other less developed parts of the world, where this community cooperation is still functioning to some degree, even within the boundaries of a larger monetary-based system. Monastic-type religious entities have gravitated toward this kind of existence as well. How can a cooperative, non-money-based system be crafted so it can be applied to a large, modern, industrial society? It would need to provide for all of humanity's needs, allowing for all the diversity, growth, and development of that caliber of society without compromising individual freedom, ideally enhancing it. Charlene had no desire to sacrifice all the advantages of her current standard of living. She felt that maintaining a modern lifestyle was essential. She had no desire to diminish that. If, she continued, by changing to some sort of non-monetary based system, it means foregoing the technological advancements humankind has achieved thus far and reverting back to a more primitive existence, or relinquishing individual rights or freedoms for the good of the whole, as in the case of so many communistic systems, then I would gladly bear with the disadvantages of the money system and be thankful for it. Charlene believed that modern society had reached a point, technologically and intellectually, where such a system was possible, opening up a new era for humankind. She tells us, what prevents this from happening is a mindset that it can't. Money creates a financial class system with disparities of lifestyles and opportunities. It is what separates the upper classes from the uncertain and labor-intensive life of the common man. It is endorsed by both the upper and lower classes due to a conviction and a belief in the merits of the system itself, and that common men's lives are improved with its practice. Modern industrialization and technology should enhance freedom by making it easier to supply and maintain the essential commodities and services. Advancements should be generating more free time for individuals, but the average person is not working less and enjoying more free time. She observed that achieving more freedom was still in direct proportion to the amount of money you had, not in direct proportion to the technological advancements of society. She continues, everyone has a myriad of complaints, but as frustrated as they are, they cannot seem to entertain the idea of a system without money. People keep telling me how impractical, unrealistic, socialistic, communistic, and ultimately un-American my idea is. It's viewed as impossible and even undesirable. It seems no matter how discontent people are with their lives, they are adamantly and compulsively loyal to the idea of money. Most people in our money system are not free. In a money system, you are only free if you have enough money to sustain a middle-class standard of living without working. We can achieve various degrees of freedom. We are free to try and get to be free, but we can only accomplish this by playing and winning at the money game. Throughout history, only the elite, the aristocracy, the wealthy, and the royalty got to be free. And this is still true in our current society, for wealth, either earned or inherited or bequeathed, gives people freedom. But if you still have to work every week to sustain the income that gives you that freedom, then you are not entirely free. You are only partially free. How much of our lives are concerned with getting a good job, making a decent wage, being financially secure, and how little of our lives are devoted to our passions and dreams. We are forced into dealing with never-ending financial and economic concerns, things ranging from the price of gasoline to investing in stocks to cutting coupons to taxes to school supplies to rents to mortgages and loans. How much of our lives are wasted in this respect? How many of us are even aware of this? End quote.